Hello and welcome. This is your favorite program, News in Depth, and I'm your presenter, Yotam Mugara. Now, Zambia is endowed with vast natural resources, and exploitation of these natural resources may translate into serious and substantial income. However, Zambia has for many decades now relied on copper as its main cash-generating resource. On today's program, Pennipher Sikainda looks at Zambia's performance as regards non-traditional exports.
It is a common inscription on most products found on Zambian shelves and streets. A huge chunk of products exchanging hands in Zambia's trading activities are mainly imported products. For a long time, Zambian revenue has been generated from mineral resources the country is endowed with in relatively large quantities. Copper ores and concentrates, as well as other base metals, form a huge chunk of traditional resources that Zambia has been exporting for decades. Nonetheless, in the last few years, there has been a shift targeted at increasing the quantities of non-traditional exports.
Zambia has been exporting mainly copper, nickel and cobalt. Those have been the major exports. So that's why they are called traditional exports, because that's what the country normally exports. Now, what the government is doing is to move away from dependence on mineral exports to diversify into other sectors. And the key sectors that have been identified have been agriculture, tourism, and manufacturing.
What then is the significance of having more exports, and how do non-traditional exports fit into the economic picture?
We have steadily seen our non-traditional exports grow, just like the traditional exports have grown, although in the last few months we've seen them kind of receding, but they're still recording a positive trend. In terms of the growth of the non-traditional exports, yes, it's been driven by quite a number of factors, quite a lot of demand coming through especially our neighbors. I think Congo, especially the Katanga region, and Angola have kind of been leading in terms of the consumption. And most of these are kind of, I think, the food and the beverages products that are leading.
Until 2010, there was very low political support for non-traditional exports, and most of them were foreign-based exports that were so much, they were influenced by external shocks onto the international markets. After 2010, there was a policy shift. There was so much emphasis on cotton, linked cotton, on tobacco, on sugarcane and coffee. Those came to be the major export products.
We have achieved significant growth in non-traditional exports. About 5 years ago, non-traditional exports carried only about 17.5% of the total exports out of Zambia. Today, as I speak to you, we are standing on 33.3% of the exports.
Central Statistical Office trade data indicates that Zambia has recorded regular trade surpluses. What is the implication of such records?
In terms of the significance of the trade surplus, it's simply that you're having more value from your exports compared to your imports. So I would say it's one source in which you determine your growth. Remember, your trade balance is a component in your growth. So it just shows that you are increasing your value addition.
Mr. Speaker.
In the current sitting of Parliament, government informed the House that Zambia's non-traditional export (NTE) earnings have grown to the tune of 2.2 billion from 2010 to 2013, while traditional export earnings grew by $1 billion during the same period. Commerce, Trade and Industry Minister Robert Sikainda told the House that the increase in percentage share represents increased diversification of exports in line with government trade policy, which promotes the growth of NTEs. And at a gathering of the Zambia Chamber of Small and Medium Enterprises, Mr. Sikainda said government is engaging manufacturers at micro, medium and large-scale levels to boost trade through clusters.
This your PF government, through our ministry, is also promoting the development of industrial and value-based clusters. Putting people together. Sometimes turning that from being a market to being an industrial estate in a small way at district level. Each district, let's identify what their endowment is. Endowment means what you can obtain in that area, either natural or what you are actually growing. For example, cashew was not indigenous to Western Province, but we brought the seed there and the cashew is growing. I know the trees there are old now. They need to be replaced. But the point is that it grows. If you go on a plane, if you're in business class or you're in first class, the first thing they give you is cashew. It's a good commodity. It's not even groundnuts, it is cashew. Meaning it has got a big market, a good price. So our job is to ensure that we've got many producers for that cashew, but not just produce it and sell it raw. We want it to be processed, packaged nicely, and put on the plane so that we can sell it to Emirates, Kenya Airways. Now, since we don't have Zambia Airways, I would have said Zambia Airways as well.
Opportunities for larger volumes of non-traditional exports are said to be vast and underutilized.
What the private sector needs to do to increase Zambian exports is to go into the non-traditional sectors as well. There's a lot of potential in other sectors, especially in the fabrication, metal fabrication industries, light manufacturing industries. Zambia has reached that stage where it can actually build a lot of capacity, export capacity in light manufacturing. Of course, there will always be the traditional agro-processing as well. Therefore, we got a lot of arable land actually. We got a lot of potential in production of agricultural products. But we need to also industrialize or think of industrialization.
We want to increase the amount of value addition to the commodities that we produce. It is not enough to produce maize. It is not enough to produce rice. It is not enough to have an animal, a cattle if you are from Namwala. You want to cut that into nice slices that ShopRite, that Pick and Pay can say, yes, this is a good commodity. Yes, looks presentable. Yes, this is well packaged. It's not what we sell in the streets, because normally we're saying, wait a minute, flies have been on this meat, and so on and so forth.
It has become apparent that a viable manufacturing industry has a huge role to play in producing valuable products that can contribute significantly to the country's revenue. Maybin Supila is Chief Executive Officer of the Zambia Association of Manufacturers. How then does he rate his organization's performance in the promotion of value addition to products produced in Zambia for local and foreign supply, especially with the diversification agenda?
That question, I think, takes me back to asking the whole question around what is it that we can improve to try and foster, obviously, the growth of the manufacturing sector, because the importance of the manufacturing sector in steering non-traditional exports cannot be overemphasized. I think even with regard to job creation. Why is it so? I think the manufacturing sector does offer backward and forward linkages. It is the backward linkages that are going to foster increased agricultural production. It is the backward linkages that are going to foster increased value addition and productivity improvement in agricultural products. Obviously, the forward linkages further offer, the use of cables, for example, that are being produced in this country in other more advanced things like maybe the transformers, as we are saying. So in answering that question, I think what I would be saying is that there's a lot that we need to do as an association. There's a lot that we need to do as a government. There's a lot that we need to do as stakeholders involved in trying to foster economic diversification.
Is the manufacturing industry doing enough to boost export quantities?
Quite a lot of our NTEs are from the manufacturing sector, which includes food processing, beverages, some chemicals. In terms of how much they can do to support our NTEs, as you know, we still have challenges in manufacturing. We're trying to grow our manufacturing. Actually, it's a desire of the country to grow manufacturing, partly as part of the export diversification program, but also as part of trying to build resilience in the economy. As you know, usually we suffer a lot when we have shocks to the prices of metals. So, but then there's still quite a lot of scope, which we haven't yet fully utilized right now.
Not just Zambia, but for the whole country, all the companies, every single farmer here, there's a huge opportunity for those farmers to grow, produce more cattle, produce more pigs, produce more chickens, produce more crops. We're in the middle of SADC here. We're uniquely positioned geographically as a country. We've got 8 neighbours. We're land linked to 8 other countries. With the improving infrastructure, roads, railways that's coming on stream, I see massive, massive opportunities for Zambia to feed the region here. Not just feed the region, we should be feeding the world. SADC wants to start feeding itself. We want to stop importing. This import should certainly maybe not stop, but slow down. We put the brakes on, encourage production in Zambia and our neighbouring countries so that we achieve self-security, food security, and we become self-sufficient in foodstuffs.
Concerns of poor infrastructure arise in the quest for Zambia to improve non-traditional export figures.
We still have facing a lot of challenges in terms of the support infrastructure to manufacturing. We've seen government scaling up roads. As you know, roads are important in transporting goods and services. Okay, goods, mainly physical goods. So probably also we have to work on our telecommunications. We're still trying to make improvements. Energy, we have seen quite a lot of new generation capacity being brought on board, but still quite some challenges because we still have some load shedding which we are trying to reduce.
There's still a long way to go, but the improvements in roads and bridges and infrastructure in Zambia the last 5 to 10 years have been phenomenal. It's fantastic to see it. There's a lot more needs to be done, but I think we're certainly moving very, very much in the right direction.
It will be very important that we look at infrastructure, and we would like to applaud the government for the efforts they're making in improving the infrastructure. But as we applaud, also would like to state that I think it would help us even more if we could direct a bit of that effort in developing the railways. Obviously, we've seen focus on the railways, but I think we need to do more because that's where opportunities for reducing logistics costs lie. Even if we did everything in-house perfectly well, we cannot realize our goal if we don't work in collaboration with the countries that are surrounding us, because we need an intervention that addresses the whole chain from the port all the way up to inland for us to improve our logistics.
The government insists that it has prioritized infrastructure improvements to boost trade within and outside Zambia.
We're upgrading the road infrastructure, first and foremost. Why? My dear brothers and sisters, any one of you who has gone to a new road which has been tarred knows very well that immediately you build the road, alongside the road, houses start to be built up. Factories start to be built up. People who did not have markets were going to have markets. Now they have a source, a place where they can take their commodities to and transport those commodities to the markets. Where are the markets? In most cases, they're in urban areas. Now you can take your rice from Chama, you can take your rice from Chambeshi, you can take your fish from Mungu, you can be able to take your rice from Mungu, you can be able to take your cashew nuts and take it onto the roads. Ask them about the road from Senanga going to Sesheke. Ask them. That is the facilitation that we're talking about. But also, what we're trying to do at the moment under the Citizens Economic Empowerment is not only to have markets in the cities, but to have markets also in the localities in which you are based.
A leading Zambian agribusiness firm exporting some of its produce to West Africa and other parts of the continent is Zambeef Products plc. The conglomerate produces a variety of agriculture-based products, including milk, beef, pork and edible oils, which contributed to the generation of export earnings valued at $30 million in the year 2013. The group operations in Ghana and Nigeria have contributed 5% to the company revenue and an additional 4% in gross profits.
The Nigeria and Ghana, that accounts now for about 5% of our turnover. It's still quite small, 5%, but it has enormous potential to grow. Obviously, we all know about Nigeria and Ghana, big, huge populations, and that part of Africa has huge opportunities for companies like us. And Nigeria and Ghana, both of those businesses are all Zambianized, fully run by people from Zambia. They're there as expatriates, and the profits that's made there is repatriated back to Zambia. So we're a multinational now, based in Zambia, with our headquarters in Zambia.
Given concerns on the low number of exports Zambia as a country has been recording, the question we posed to the Zambeef CEO is how has his company managed?
We started off as retailers, if you recall, maybe you don't. We're retailers, and when you're running a retail shop like a butchery, for example, you need to sell beef and pork and chicken and dairy and all of those things. We went into all these businesses over time because we need to offer a full basket to our customers. And we went into the stock feed. We needed stock feed to produce chickens and eggs and pigs ourselves. And the Zamanita, the soy crushing business, we went into that business. We acquired Zamanita in 08 because we needed a steady supply of soy cake into our stock feed plant. So everything makes 100% sense to us. We are very, very diversified. We're fully integrated, vertically integrated, very diversified, and I don't think there's anything like us that I've ever seen anywhere.
Technology, skills development and innovation have also been identified as important elements in boosting non-traditional exports.
You can talk all you want about infrastructure, the framework and so on. At the end of the day, what you need is a product on the market which can be produced. And that is what's called industrialization. So if this product is commercialized and you begin producing it, then you will have an industry. It could be in manufacturing or in the services sector. But this is how to industrialize, this is how to grow, by allowing people to be able to come up with the innovations with the products that can actually be commercialized and translated into real industries, into real factories, into services that employ people, that produce products which are traded and which are exported.
I think a lot of countries that have made huge leaps in diversification, in upping manufacturing, they have invested very heavily in technology, innovation. I think we haven't seen a lot of effort with regard to those that are involved in innovation-related things and industry working together. That linkage needs to be strengthened.
These innovations seem to be affected by the cost of credit.
There should be further measures by Bank of Zambia to free up liquidity with commercial banks so that they can lend money not so strict on collateral, because it's the requirement for collateral that is holding up most people from borrowing money from commercial banks.
Before you even think of exporting, you need to produce a product And there you're talking about technology. Do you have the technology to produce goods and services that meet the standards in the export market, right? Our private sector accessing credit at favorable terms to be competitive in the region. What kind of programs are we giving them, for instance, to subsidize part of their production costs, right? What support are we giving them to access these markets, to develop distribution networks in markets where they're supposed to be, into destinations where they're supposed to be selling these goods?
Horticultural products are another segment of non-traditional exports appearing to be doing fine in Zambia's trade. The Zambia Export Growers Association, ZEGA, has outlined that it has been able to export horticultural products into the EU market, including the UK, Holland, France and Germany, forming 95% of its exports. In Africa, Zambian flowers and vegetables are being largely exported into South Africa. Luke Mbewe, ZEGA Chief Executive Officer, explains that while numbers reflect positive performance of the horticulture industry, the cost of doing business is affecting trade in flowers and vegetables. He lists concerns as the high cost of air freight, high interest rates, suspension of the duty-free facility, and increased cost of electricity as well as exchange rate volatility. But trade analyst Gilbert Nkamba argues that the cost of doing business has significantly improved.
The cost of doing business has been significantly reduced. You reduce the cost of doing business, first of all, by improving the road infrastructure and the rail infrastructure. You open up all the areas where the production is taking place to where the market will take place. Then secondly, the encouragement of microcredit schemes. If you remember, sometimes 2012 or last year, the Bank of Zambia reduced the reserve ratios. Now, that was in a bid to increase the liquidity of the banks so that they can lend money at low interest rates.
Zambia belongs to the regional trading bloc COMESA, and the country has the second largest share of the COMESA export market after Egypt, sharing 24% and Zambia 18%. The COMESA Free Trade Area has encouraged investments into Zambia to benefit from the larger COMESA market, such as in the cement and fabrication sectors, and has promoted the growth of Zambian industries such as the beef industry.
Zambia exports, coppers, things like that, cement. It's raw products really, a bit of processed products as well. But it is more of an importer than an exporter. This is because we have got some fairly large economies in the region, especially South Africa, which is not a COMESA country, it's not a COMESA member state. But most of these imports into Zambia are actually from South Africa. The policy implication, therefore, is that Zambia needs to export more.
The regional body has further provided incentives to boost Zambia's trade capacity under the Regional Integration Support Mechanism by providing $1.1 million in 2013 and $1.5 million in 2014.
Last year, this money was for budget support, but the Ministry of Commerce had identified projects already which were targeted for these funds. This year, it's actually project support, and Zambia has produced quite a number of good ideas on how this money can be used. This money is going to go into the standards areas, trade facilitation, the leather sector. There you are talking about diversification. So this money goes to the government, and the government uses it to support the private sector.
Industry players have recommendations on substantive steps to take in building the profile of Zambia's non-traditional exports.
One thing that does spring to mind is the imports of edible oil. It needs to be controlled at the very least. Uncontrolled imports of anything can create havoc. I think we should be doing more to protect local industry, especially infant industries. Protect them, let them grow. We should not be a dumping ground for edible oil from Malaysia and Indonesia, those have got developed economies. You know, we're just a dumping ground for them. And it's very good that the Poultry Association and the government have fought very hard against poultry imports. We don't want to be a dumping ground for chickens from South America. We need to develop our own poultry industry so that we solidify our food security here, not just dependent on food supplies from these other countries. If a country cannot feed itself, then we're not a country, in my opinion.
And then there should be more emphasis on the private-public partnership arrangements. These private-public partnership arrangements should emphasize that Zambians have a stake into the running of major businesses. So as we have people with capital coming from outside the country to inject money into the economy, they should partner with Zambians by law. That's what is happening in South Africa. Major companies investing in South Africa, they cannot start up a big company without local participation.
I think the tax policy should recognize the dynamics that are taking place in the region, because our competitors are importing these things duty-free and obviously exporting into Zambia duty-free. And then it means that their product is more competitive than ours, because for us, we are paying duty on a lot of items that feed into producing the whole product. The example of a shoe is one that fascinates me, because when you look at the shoe, we are producing footwear here, mostly protective footwear. When you look at the shoe itself, you look at the composition of the materials that are going there, you'd be shocked to look at the duty that says, the lace says 25% duty. The polish that you use to determine the color of the shoe, whether it will be brown or be industrial polish, you're paying 25%. When you look at the comforter that is inside the shoe, you have 15% duty. When you look at the sole, you have, I think, if I'm not mistaken, 15 or 25% duty. When you look at the ear lids where you pass your lace, you're paying 25% duty on all those small things. So when you aggregate the duty you are paying on all this, it becomes very, very expensive when a full shoe from Zimbabwe, from South Africa, will come in duty-free.
A survey of what investors look for in a country shows that tax holidays are not the first thing they are looking at. They are looking at things like political stability, macroeconomic stability. They don't want economies that have high inflation, high debt ratios. So they want macroeconomic stability. They are looking at safety of life. They don't want economies where there's too much crime, where they will die. Nobody wants to, usually, to die. And then they are looking at markets. So if you have a regional market, they will come to invest in your country in order to tap into the regional market.
Many factors are at play and expectations high from all stakeholders in realizing the dream of a Zambia that is not only self-sufficient but able to export large volumes of products and services other than copper to the rest of the world.
You've got a longer shelf life on it, the quality is a lot better.
Thank you so much for joining us on today's episode of News in Depth. Please make a date next week at the same time for another interesting program. I've been your presenter, Yotam Mugara. It's goodbye for now.